Hello everybody, welcome to the program on Mind and Mental Health. This program relates to your course MPC 051, that is Fundamentals of Mental Health. We have with us today Professor R.K. Chadha, Professor of Psychiatry in the Department of Psychiatry, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Now the term mind, it is both simple as well as complex. We use the term mind quite often in our day-to-day interactions, but have we ever paid any attention to the term mind? What does it mean? What is mind? What does it consist of? What are its complexities? How does it function and how does it affect our functioning, our mental health, our psychological well-being? So Professor Chadha today will discuss about all these and more. Before we proceed further, let us see the objectives of this program. Today we will discuss about what is mind, what is mental health. We will also talk about positive mental health, the role of family and culture, and also the promotion of mental health. So Professor Chadha, when we talk about mind, usually we relate it to paying attention to. For example, when we say being mindful or put your mind into something. Okay. Also we associate mind with memory, thinking and emotions, and we locate mind in our brain. So can you just explain what is the physiological basis of mind?
Yeah, when we come to the word mind, what is mind? Mind is a abstract concept. We may say that it's the part of brain which is involved in the psychological functioning.
Okay.
The word mind comes from a Latin word minding or paying attention. The concept of mind has existed in our ancient literature also. In Sanskrit it's called manas or man. Even our ancient religious scripts, epics like Gita has also referred to mind. Lord Krishna has referred to mind, giving lessons to Arjuna during the Mahabharata. And mind is also called psyche or the psychic apparatus of our brain. It's basically in the functioning is involved in the neurons or a coordinated functioning of neurons. We have billions of neurons in our brain which are interconnected, and there is a regular energy transfers, regular transfer of messages occurs through these energies or action potentials which is involved in the functioning of the mind. So any lack of coordination or incoordination in this processes, that leads to any in the disturbances in the functioning of the mind.
Okay. So that means if there is a disturbance in the neural functioning, so will that affect the mind also?
Yeah, whenever there is a functioning in the integration of these neuronal connections or this transmission of energy or transmission of messages across the neurons, that will lead to the disturbance in the functioning of the mind.
So how does it affect, and how, I mean, what can be done to restore the functioning?
Yeah, there are a number of methods available for this. It would depend on the cause of the dysfunction, what has led to the dysfunction.
Yeah.
For example, a person gets head injury. So head injury, there has been bleeding in the brain, or there is a tumor in the brain. So in that case, now these things are relatively rare. But for these a kind of neurosurgical intervention, means surgery to remove that clot of brain or surgery to remove brain tumor, that would be done. Now more often what happens is we may face some stresses. The stress affects our functioning of the mind. So in that case some psychological interventions like in the form of counseling or some psychotherapy, that can be done. Suppose there is a more severe dysfunction, then some kind of medication may be required. Say if some person is suffering from has developed depression or psychosis, so in that case specific medications would be required which would restore the functioning of neurons or neuronal integration by having different mechanisms, biochemical mechanisms, or by that they will restore the functioning.
So this is about the biological basis of mind, the way we explain it. Now we also talk about mind in terms of consciousness. So now would you explain this part of mind, like how do we explain in terms of consciousness?
Mind is a state of consciousness in a way. Sigmund Freud more than 100 years ago had tried to explain the functioning of the mind in terms of how is the psychological functioning, and the Sigmund Freud had given, initially he had given topographical model, what you called model of say that most of the part of the mind is unconscious, it's not in our conscious awareness, it's not accessible to us. Nearly 90% of the mind is unconscious, it's only 10% of the mind which is conscious, which is accessible to our conscious awareness. The part of mind which is in unconscious sphere, this is dynamic, this is always striving to come to the conscious. This comes of consists of various instinctual drives. It consists of very many forbidden memories or many things which are not required to our conscious mind. It's like I would like to compare it with the web. When we say try to Google some information from the web, and we put a word and we get hundreds of connections to that. But out of those hundreds, it would be only 4 or 5 which are relevant. So whatever is relevant to our conscious awareness, that would be stay in our conscious part of the mind. All the other things will be in the unconscious because they are not relevant.
So these things that mean they come into the forefront.
Yeah, they come into. So when we want something that we want to remember something, or like someone is appearing in exam, you get a question. Now there is so much information available in our unconscious mind which may be relevant to that question. So once you try to concentrate, one is able to get the answer. So that's how the unconscious thing will reach the conscious. So this is how the things which are not acceptable to the conscious mind, those will remain in the unconscious mind.
How do you explain this further, like as Freud has talked about mind a lot? So he has different explanations for the mind, like in terms of consciousness, unconsciousness and subconsciousness. And also I think he has given the structural theory also. So would you like to explain that aspect?
At a later stage, then Freud had come with the structural theory of mind, which again he tried to explain the function of mind in terms of different components. Now these are not the in true sense structural components, like it's not like he had given 3 components of mind under the structural theory, that was id, ego and superego. Now that does not mean that id is located at a particular area of the area of the brain, or ego is located, but this is more of the concepts actually. No, id one could equate to a large extent to unconscious, though it's not everything in unconscious mind is not id. There are other areas also, like some of the components of unconscious mind may refer to superego, some may refer to ego also, but most of it is consists of instinctual drives, and it works on the pleasure principle. Now it refers to very instinctual drives which may be sexual drives, maybe hunger or maybe aggression. Now one always tries to control aggression or hunger. So suppose you are sitting in a class and you feel hungry, you won't eat immediately, you will try to delay this this desire. So here comes the superego, which tells you that you should not be eating in the class. So this is the id. Then the second component is the ego. Ego is the logical or the decision making part of the mind, which tells you, which decides, makes a decision. Like you have 10 choices to a question, or say you want to, you're feeling hungry, you have 5 items, you decide that which one I should eat now. So that's the ego. Or say which, say you have to go to your college, so which vehicle you should be using. So the ego will guide you based on that.
Buying a car also, you decide about which
so different kinds of decision. Then there is next is the superego. Superego is the conscience, or say it's a disciplining part of the mind, which will tell you which is wrong, what is wrong, or what is right. Like you're seeing a beautiful girl, you feel sexual desire, but it's not the right time, or it's not correct, it's socially not appropriate. So superego will put a discipline on you, that you should not be doing this thing. So this was another theory which was given by Freud at a later stage, that was around 1920s.
So that means when we talk about mind, there is, like as you said, id, ego and superego, and all these 3 interact, interplay and combinedly influence ultimately what we decide or how our mind operates or functions.
They work in coordination.
Now this consciousness and ego, all these things, if you talk about our Indian tradition, it is all there in our Indian traditional thought and knowledge also. And it also talks about interrelationship between body and mind. Now from the Indian tradition point of view, how do you explain how the Indian tradition has viewed the mind? What is the perspective, Indian perspective?
In Indian concept, because we have the concept of mind going back to Vedas and to the time of Ramayana, and because whenever Lord Krishna has spoken in the while giving sermons to Arjuna, he has Lord Krishna has given all how to control mind, how to control your man, and he has given lessons on that.
Basically the focus was on mind.
Focus was on the mind. So that's why the concept of mind has existed in our Indian scriptures, Vedas, and we consider mind, body and soul, they are a tripod kind of thing. They are interconnected with each other. And in our Indian tradition, another thing is the mind has often been equated to heart. When we say man, we refer to heart, but when we are referring mind to the heart, it's not the heart as a function, or the it's the mind which is the controlling part of the body, which controls the different functions of the body. In a way, the mind has been described as a sixth sensory organ. Besides say vision, olfactory or audition. So it's a touch. So this is a sixth organ which controls all the functions of the body. So that's how the mind has been conceptualized in the Indian tradition.
Now we discussed about the biological basis of mind as well as the psychological basis of mind, and also we talked about the Indian traditional way of thinking about mind. Now let us see how this mind is related to mental health. Now as we all know, mental health is a very broad concept. When we say mental health, it not only refers to the mental disorders or mental illness, it also throws light on the mental health aspect, that is the how to increase our mental health, how to increase our psychological well-being. It also talks about the autonomy, competence, self-actualization, and overall like how to increase our psychological and emotional well-being. Now Professor Chadha, can you explain or elaborate further on this concept of mental health?
The first thing is in mental health, mental health does not mean that this is a absence of mental illness. This was the thing, the concept of health which was given by World Health Organization way back in 1948, that health is not absence of disease, rather it's a state of well-being, physical, mental and social well-being. So same way the mental health has a number of components, like a sense of well-being, a sense of worth, a sense of self-satisfaction. So these are the things which make mental health. And then the other thing is mental health affects our all body systems, like our body functioning. Say if one is not healthy, one does not have a good mental health, so that would affect different body functions. It affects the functioning through our hormones, that's called the endocrines or neuroendocrines, and the other is the immune functioning. Like you are feeling too much stressed, you tend to get common cold, or you tend to get other illnesses. If you feel so, because stress affects the immune functioning, or you are likely to get infections. You are feeling stressed, your heart rate increases. So that's the physiological connection between the mental health and the physical functioning.
So here also when we talk about mental health, there are like different approaches to mental health, like we talk about mental health in terms of resiliency and other things. So can you just highlight, throw light on those different approaches to mental health?
Just now I was telling a sense of well-being. So similarly, mental health is not just normal, it's conceptualized as above normal. It's a mental state in which the person feels very comfortable, or which is a desirable kind of state. One has a good capacity to work or capacity to love. So that's how the mental health is defined as, conceptualized as above normal. The other thing is mental health is as a sense of maturity. The other thing is as a positive or spiritual thinking.
Okay.
Means a person is getting positive emotions, is feeling happy, has that's a concept in terms of positive psychology. Then there is a concept as a emotional intelligence or socio-emotional intelligence. A person is able to decide or is able to make a healthy relationships with others. Means is able to behave in a socially acceptable way. So there comes the mental health as a person has emotional intelligence.
So that means like interpersonal relationship that we talk about. So mental health also has an implication for our interpersonal relationship, and also I think for the intra relationship,
like relationship with the self,
intrapersonal and interpersonal.
Then feeling of subjective well-being. Then mental health has resilience, that is ability to adapt to different situations. So that's another. So these are the different ways in which mental health can be conceptualized.
Okay, right. After knowing all these different ways in which mental health can be conceptualized, one thing that comes to mind here is that culture. Our culture has a very influential role on our well-being. So when we are talking about mental health, how do you view culture coming into the picture there?
Yeah, culture is a very complex concept. Right? It means comprises of our habits, our say food habits, our belief systems, the way we behave in different situations, customs. So all these things, they also are affect our mental health and the way we say when we are feeling stressed. So how would we express our stress? So that would be determined by culture. Because some of the behaviors may be considered as indicating illness. Suppose one person is feeling sad or low, and it's all the time feeling sad, depressed. Now, a feeling of sadness or depression may not be taken as an indicator of illness in the culture. But if one says that I am having pain, I am having weakness, that would be accepted as an illness. So persons would like to go for some kind of somatic symptoms or somatic physical complaints once they have to express their stress. Like in our culture or say non-Western cultures, usually if the person complains of some physical symptoms, person would be given benefit of being ill. But if person says that I am feeling stressed, I am feeling tense, the person won't get that benefit. So this is how the culture would express, would affect expression of symptoms or expression of illness.
So that means culture does have a very important role when we talk about mental illness and mental health. Now, there are also some other explanatory models of when we talk about mental illness. So, can you just discuss about those models of mental illness?
Yeah. Now, these models would depend on the who is defining it or who is or these would be affected by the culture or in the family. There would be familial influences. Now, a person who is a trained doctor would go for a medical model. So there are different models. One of the models is called is moral model. That is one may consider illness as a moral weakness or a feelings of selfishness which is leading to illness. Some kind of say deficiencies in the person or moral deficiency in the person which are leading to the illness. That's the moral model. The other is a religious model which has been there for since centuries or since the time of ancient times. Means where the person, when someone would get ill, the person people would go and pray for that there's something wrong has happened because of which God has is not pleased. So they would try to please God to become well. So that's a religious model.
Supernatural beliefs also that
supernatural beliefs also. Supernatural beliefs in which the person would go to faith healers to get relief from the illness. That's magical or supernatural. There's some difference between religious model and religious is towards the God, where supernatural is towards the witches or some. Then is a medical model which says that illness is because of some biological disturbance, some physical disturbance in the body. So that's leading to the illness. So for that, definitely it's a doctor who would be treating the illness. Then there is a psychosocial stress model, that stress has led to illness. Say a person has broken relationship, has not done well in the exam, so that's leading to the illness. So that's the psychosocial stress model.
So that means when we are talking about mental health, it is not as simple as it appears to be. There are a lot of approaches that talks about like how to view mental health and how to conceptualize it. Okay. Now, in Indian culture, family plays an important role. So, here Professor Chadha, when we talk about mental health, what is the role of family here?
Yeah, family has a very complex relationship with mental health, which would come, one is the in form of increasing risk of illness. That was a concept which was being used in last 100-150 years, especially in the Western countries. They would say that family is responsible for illness. That time more and more evidence was coming from genetic research that there is a risk of illnesses like schizophrenia or depression or manic depressive illness being inherited.
So, family contributing to the development of mental illness.
In the form of genetic role. The second was that it was if there has been fights amongst the parents or there has been faulty upbringing or double bind theory, one theory which was given long back, that was contributing to the illness, to schizophrenia. Especially these theories started from for family theories of schizophrenia. But it was around 1950s. There is a very famous psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Vidyasagar who started using families in treatment of psychiatric patients of schizophrenia. That experiment happened in Amritsar. In that he had installed tents outside mental hospital of Amritsar and was using, at that time medicines was not available. So here comes the family's role in Indian concept. In India, families have been taking care of persons with mental illness since centuries. We never had adequate number of mental health professionals, and which is true also even now. So, families are providing all kinds of care to the person, like in the form of supervising treatment, providing nursing care, providing financial support. So, that's the way families support has been helping persons with mental illness.
Viewers, here as we saw here from the discussion, that family plays a crucial role not only in the causation of the mental disorders, also in the treatment and prevention of mental disorders. Like in the causation of mental disorders, we can say that as Professor Chadha said, it can contribute in the form of genetic role, or the family environment can lead to the occurrence of various mental illness. Also at the same time, family also has an important role in the prevention of mental disorder and the promotion of mental health also. So, both family and culture play a very significant role in when we are talking about mental health. Now, let us see from Professor Chadha, what are the strategies or what are the interventions that can be taken up to promote mental health?
Yeah. In our country as well as in the Western countries, there is lot of stigma for mental illnesses. Like mental illnesses are incurable, or mentally persons with mental illness are often dangerous, or they are aggressive. So, people often do not want to interact with the persons with mental illness. So, we need to act at the stigma associated with mental illnesses. We are well aware that mental illnesses can be treated with the medications and other methods of treatment. So, this message that mental illnesses are treatable, this message is to be given to the community, so that people do not fear mental illness, they come to the mental health professionals for treatment at an early stage. So, that is one of the major strategies which we need to put across the community. That is one. The other things, there are some methods which will help in mental health promotion, and they help in prevention also. These are the good health practices like regular exercise, regular physical exercise, our traditional methods of meditation, yoga, they have been well proven to be protective against stress induced illnesses, and it's said that regular exercise, physical exercise is a very good antidepressant. So, if person has mild depression, or it offers you protection against depression, one is having regular exercise. Same way, staying away from the drugs, alcohol, that's another preventive strategies, because that also any drug or alcohol, they increase the chances of getting mental illness, and as such drug dependence, alcohol dependence are also mental disorders. So then there are specific populations like children or say elderly population. So where the schools teachers can play an important role, because often children are spending a lot of time in the schools. So many times many of their early problems like emotional problems or say specific developmental delays like if child has problems in reading or writing or arithmetic skills, they get manifest in the school environment. So if the school teacher is sensitive to these issues and is able to identify, so then early intervention can be started at that stage, and which will prevent the further development of disability. So these are the same way elderly living alone or say means who have say post retirement phase or say so they are also prone to develop mental health problems that are higher risk. So providing some kind of support or say group activities or so socialization, so these also help in they are a part of mental health promotion.
There are also like some other specific strategies that would you like to elaborate on those strategies?
Another thing is like first time young mothers. There's another group especially from the underprivileged sections. So that's the other thing. Media can play a very important role. In fact, in media in the last 2-3 decades, if we scan across different newspapers or magazines, most newspaper magazines have some kind of columns being written by the psychiatrists or psychologists, and often there are some columns in the form of question answer sessions. Even on the radio and television we have regular programs which are providing solutions to the or say educative programs. So these are different strategies which are helpful in mental health promotion as well as providing education and early intervention, and so these are the different strategies which have been we have National Mental Health Program of India which is also involved in initiated number of educational activities, IEC activities.
Today we discussed about mind and mental health. Also we discussed about like how mind has been conceptualized in different ways, and mind has a relation, like mind and body are interrelated, and this affects our mental health also. And culture and family, both these have a significant influence on mental health. And at the end we also discussed about the various strategies, the interventional strategies that can be taken up to promote mental health. Now so thank you Professor Chadha for this program. And learners, at the end if you have any query you can contact to the discipline of psychology @ignou.ac.in. Thank you.